I want you to take a second and really think about your most basic, fundamental daily habit.
Right.
For most of us, it's eating. I mean, you wake up, you have breakfast, you get hungry later, you grab a snack, you sit down for dinner. It's just this inescapable, rhythmic drumbeat of human survival.
Yeah, you just don't even question it.
Exactly. But I want you to imagine a reality that completely, shatters that assumption. What if there is a time, and I mean this in a really deep cosmological sense, before the very first meal?
Right, which is just wild to wrap your head around.
It is a time when absolutely no living being had ever placed anything into its mouth to survive, no eating, no drinking for sustenance, and yet no one was starving.
Which sounds impossible, but that's exactly what we're getting into today.
We are! Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a really radical text titled Before the First Swallow, The World and Its Beings in the Age of Unbroken Somatic Integrity. And our mission today is to figure out, if we didn't start out as consumers, what were we?
Yeah, and it's a premise that immediately just, upends everything we assume about biology. To grasp what's going on here, we really have to look past standard evolutionary charts.
Right.
The text is exploring this period described as the age of unbroken somatic integrity.
Ah.
And before we go further, we should probably define that term.
Yeah, because somatic gets thrown around a lot in modern wellness circles.
It does, yeah. But in this framework, somatic refers strictly to the deep physical intelligence of the body itself. Not your cognitive mind analyzing a situation, but the actual cellular awareness of your flesh and bones.
Like your body just knowing what to do.
Exactly. The central thesis is that during this early age, the human body operated at the full amplitude of its original design. And that design was, eventually interrupted, heavily modified, and basically forgotten.
So right out of the gate, there is a massive paradigm shift here. The core argument hinges on the idea that originally the human body was not a processor, it was a receiver. Okay, let's unpack this for a second. We are so heavily conditioned to think of the body like a combustion engine, right?
Oh, absolutely. Calories in, calories out.
Exactly. You put gas in the tank, which is food, and the engine burns it to create energy. And if the tank is empty, the car sputters and stops. But if we follow the logic laid out in this text, we were originally built more like a solar panel.
Which is a great analogy.
We effortlessly absorbed ambient energy simply by existing within our environment.
And what's fascinating here is how that fundamentally changes the relationship between you and the space around you.
Yeah.
It wasn't magic, it was a highly calibrated biological state.
So how did it actually work?
Well, nourishment was absorbed directly from the Earth's living field.
Yeah.
Through the skin, the breath, and sheer proximity to living matter.
Wow.
Yeah. The Earth wasn't just a place where you happened to forage or, hunt to find a meal. The Earth was the meal.
Yeah.
The atmosphere itself was dense with a sustaining intelligence.
I want to pause on that phrase for a second. Sustaining intelligence. Because that implies the air itself carried exactly what the cells needed.
Right.
Like, imagine stepping outside right now and feeling a breeze against your face. Usually you just register the temperature, maybe the wind speed.
Yeah, it's just weather.
But in this pre-consumption state, your skin would actually metabolize the energy in that air current. You didn't walk on the earth, you were plugged into it. Because the environment lacked nothing, the physical form experienced absolutely no lack.
And think about the implications of that. It leads to probably the most provocative assertion in this entire exploration.
Which is?
That hunger, as we experience it today, is a learned secondary system. It isn't a biological default at all.
Wait, really? Hunger is learned?
According to this text, yes.
Yeah.
It is an adaptation, almost like an addiction, that developed only in response to the introduction of oral consumption. Before that first swallow, you didn't experience hunger because the field you inhabited was perpetually sustaining.
So you breathed and you were fed, you stood on the soil and you were fed.
It's exactly.
Okay, wait. I have to push back hard on this, and I know you, listening, are probably thinking the exact same thing right now.
Go for it.
If we were these radiant solar panels, perfectly sustained by the breeze and the soil, why do we have the plumbing of a combustion engine?
Ah, yeah, the anatomy question.
Right. I mean, we have a mouth, a stomach, a liver, 30 feet of intestines, a highly acidic digestive tract. Evolution doesn't just build a massive energy-intensive organ system for fun.
No, it doesn't.
So if we weren't eating, what in the world were those organs doing?
That is the ultimate biological hurdle here. And the explanation provided diverges entirely from modern anatomy. The text argues that those organs did exist, but their primary function had nothing to do with breaking down physical matter.
Okay, so what were they doing?
They were sensory and resonance chambers.
Resonance here, like the body of an acoustic guitar.
That's a really great way to visualize it. If your primary mode of survival is absorbing ambient intelligence from the environment, you need internal mechanisms to distribute and harmonize that energy.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so the stomach, in this framework, wasn't an acid vat. It was a dense cluster of somatic nerves, which, interestingly enough, modern science still refers to as our second brain.
Oh, wow. Right, the enteric nervous system.
Exactly. So it was designed to process atmospheric pressure and the Earth's subtle electromagnetic field. The intestines were this intricate network for distributing that gathered resonance deep into the skeletal structure.
So these organs were basically auxiliary to our primary connection with the environment.
Right. They weren't processing plants or solid food yet.
Okay, so if everything was functioning with this incredible frictionless perfection, why change? I mean, if introducing solid food meant bringing a foreign substance into a completely self-contained system, why take that first bite? It seems like an enormous evolutionary mistake.
To understand the why, we really have to examine the sheer cost of consumption. The text explains that when a being takes a physical substance into its body, orally even, like an apple,
Sure, something healthy.
right, the most beneficial, healthy substance imaginable, that apple carries its own distinct signal. It carries its own frequency, its own cellular structure.
And the body has to deal with that.
It makes a massive demand on the body's interpretive resources. The body has to break it down, sort the nutrients from the waste, process it, expel what it doesn't need.
So basically, introducing solid food was like dropping a wrench into a really delicate musical instrument.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Suddenly, the body has to stop humming and start grinding.
And that grinding requires immense biological labor. Over countless generations, the text argues that the human form literally shifted and reorganized to manage the intense, full-time job of processing physical food.
So those deep sensory systems we just talked about.
Gone. The ones devoted to long-range perception and direct environmental absorption were essentially cannibalized and repurposed to handle digestion.
Man, this flies in the face of how we usually view our own history. We tend to view human evolution as this triumphant upward trajectory of, gaining new tools and abilities.
Oh, definitely. We see it as progress.
But this frames the onset of eating as a profound loss. It wasn't a neutral adaptation, it was a narrowing. We didn't just gain a way to extract calories, we lost our transparent relationship with the living field.
Exactly. The text emphasizes that our bodies literally became denser, heavier, more opaque. The translucency to the somatic field, as they put it, was sealed over.
You traded direct communion for a supply chain.
That's a profound way to put it, yeah. But this narrowing didn't just change the interior of the human form. If we zoom out, it implies a catastrophic shift in the entire ecology of the planet.
Right, because here's where it gets really interesting. If our bodies became denser and heavier to process food, that implies we started taking something from the environment that wasn't freely given.
Yes.
How did the world react to suddenly being consumed? Because this conceptual rupture wasn't just biological, it was deeply relational.
So before consumption, the world is described in the text as operating in a state of stillness of relationship.
Stillness of relationship.
Yeah, that doesn't mean it was a silent, dead landscape. It was alive with sound, movement, growth. But the relationship between all those living things was still. The text calls it co-presence.
Which completely shatters our modern understanding of nature. Today, we look at a forest and we see a food chain.
Always. Who's eating who?
Exactly. The rabbit eats the grass, the wolf eats the rabbit, the worms eat the wolf. We romanticize that and call it the circle of life, or interdependence. But in a state of pure co-presence, nothing extracted from anything else to survive.
Right. Every single thing existed alongside everything else, sustained by the ambient field itself, not by eating each other.
Which means no being was structurally positioned as the raw material for another being's survival.
And that is the definition of true coherence in this text. But the moment an inhabitant of this world started ripping up plants or, hoarding water specifically to fuel their own internal combustion engine, the entire dynamic shattered.
The earth ceased to be a sustaining field that you simply inhabit. It became a resource. And a resource is something you take a piece of, you destroy it, consume it, and convert it into your own existence. That single mental shift from field to resource is basically the seed of every extractive industry we have today.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
the text treats the Earth not as a dead rock floating in space, but as a deeply conscious living entity.
Right.
When this extraction began, the Earth didn't just passively let itself be chewed up and depleted. Its intelligence recognized that if it didn't adapt to this violent new relational demand, there would be total devastation.
So what did it do?
It actively adjusted. The Earth became hypergenerative. It began producing in absolute wild abundance what its inhabitants were suddenly taking from it by force.
So basically, the Earth became that overly accommodating host at a dinner party who panics and cooks a five-course meal just because you asked for a glass of water.
That is a remarkably accurate, if slightly lighter, way to picture it. Yeah,
Okay.
it overcompensated to ensure survival. But there is a haunting, deeply tragic detail attached to this new fertility. This hypergenerativity came with a profound grief embedded in the soil itself.
A soil sorrow.
Yes, the Earth was producing the food we suddenly demanded, but it did so with a relationship of pure co-presence was gone forever. It wasn't just dirt producing crops. It was a conscious field mourning the loss of harmony.
That is incredibly poetic. And dark? The knowledge that we were no longer partners inhabiting the world, but parasites actively consuming it.
Yeah, it's a heavy concept.
And imagine this transition wasn't a sudden overnight event. There had to be a long, agonizing transitional period where bodies were simultaneously trying to operate on their original somatic intelligence while also developing this desperate dependency on oral intake.
Original capacity to
Impact your Tuesday morning.
that's the million-dollar question.
Because this framework argues that the very first hunger was not physical, it was existential.
That is the core revelation of the source text. The exact moment the human body registered itself as requiring an external input to continue existing, it learned to understand itself as incomplete.
It rewired our baseline status.
Completely.
We used to know, at a cellular level, that we were whole. Then suddenly the body's default setting became insufficient.
And that deep cellular registration of insufficiency, it never left us. It is the origin of a very specific suffering. Perspective here is explicitly telling us that this sensation is not nutritional at all. Your body doesn't need more vitamins, macros, or calories.
So what is it?
What you are feeling in front of that open refrigerator is the somatic memory of our original wholeness, crying out from beneath the heavy machinery of digestion. It is experienced as its own absence.
It's the memory of wholeness experienced as a phantom limb. That is incredible. And that perfectly explains why no meal, no matter how perfectly prepared, ever truly permanently satisfies us. Because your deep cellular intelligence recognizes that every piece of food is just a crude substitute for a state of being it can't quite name, but continuously seeks.
It wants to go back.
It wants to go back to before the first swallow.
It wants to step out of the logic of lack and be held by the living field again.
Okay, so this brings up a massive looming question. Is this just a tragedy?
Well,
Or are we doomed to wander around forever, vaguely unsatisfied, burdened by the soil's grief and our own heavy digestive tracts? Because that's a pretty bleak outlook. Or does the text say there is a way back?
this raises an important question, and thankfully the text says there is a very compelling path back. And it centers on that idea of somatic memory.
Okay.
The pre-consumption state isn't just a lost chapter in a cosmological history book. It is a living memory buried deep within your cellular structure. It is the foundation that all the heavy systems of consumption were built on top of.
But the catch is that it's entirely non-cognitive, right? You can't think your way back to it. You can't just philosophize yourself into being a solar panel again while you're eating a cheeseburger.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
Precisely because the thinking, analyzing mind is largely a product of the post-consumption world. To access this ancient memory, you have to bypass the cognitive brain entirely and go straight to the somatic. You have to use the physical body to remind the physical body.
Which throws a massive spotlight on behaviors humans have been doing for millennia. Extended fasting, deep breath work, intentional earth contact, immersion in cold, living water.
But look at how modern wellness culture treats those practices today. We apply conventional transactional logic to them.
Oh, totally. We think of fasting as a biohack to induce autophagy, burn fat, or, detox.
Right, we take nature walks to lower our cortisol levels so we can be more productive at work. We are constantly measuring the inputs and the outputs.
We treat wellness like we're just tuning up the combustion engine.
Exactly. But the cosmological framework claims these practices don't work through that input-output logic at all. They work through silencing.
That's silencing.
Yeah. When you engage in extended fasting, or when you immerse yourself in a freezing river, you aren't adding a new healthy input. You are intentionally stripping away the loud, demanding inputs of consumption.
It's like a massive factory shutting down its noisy assembly line for the night.
That's a great way to look at it.
As long as the conveyor belts are running and the gears are grinding, you can't hear anything else. Only when the heavy machinery of digestion stops entirely can the maintenance crew, which is your older, deeper cellular intelligence, actually step out of the shadows and do its work.
That's a perfect metaphor. You are turning off the engine, and in that profound physiological quiet, the body is allowed to return, even just slightly, to its original operating mode.
And what happens then?
The physical form responds to this temporary restoration with extreme clarity, with a feeling of inexplicable lightness, and crucially, with a massive reduction in that persistent, low-frequency existential hunger.
Because it finally hears the broadcast it has been searching for, the conclusion drawn here is incredibly empowering.
It really is.
It means that every single time we consciously reduce our oral intake, or even when we choose liquid and living foods over dense, highly processed ones, we are doing something far more profound than dieting. We are quieting the deafening noise of the factory just enough to let our body hear its own oldest signal.
The signal from before the first swallow. The moment you intentionally choose less, your body remembers what it was like to need nothing at all.
It remembers what it was like to be completely held by everything. It's a total paradigm shift in how we understand our own physical sensations.
It takes the most mundane aspect of our daily lives, our meals, our snacks, our cravings, and elevates it. It frames our daily hunger as the site of our deepest existential longing and our oldest cosmological trauma.
Well, let's synthesize this journey we've just been on because it is a lot to process. We started by dismantling the idea of a body as a machine requiring fuel. We viewed it instead as a perfectly tuned receiver, effortlessly sustained by the Earth's ambient intelligence in a beautiful state of co-presence.
Then we tracked the catastrophic biological and relational rupture, the moment of the first swallow, which initiated a narrowing.
Right, a reorganization that turned our sensory organs into a heavy digestive tract and turned the earth from a sustaining partner into a usable resource, prompting a deep, lingering grief within the soil itself.
And finally, we looked at how that ancient shift echoes in your kitchen right now, how that persistent everyday hunger and dissatisfaction you feel isn't really a lack of food.
It's the somatic grief of a body that remembers it was once perfectly whole, and the realization that by temporarily stepping away from the endless cycle of consumption, you can actually touch that original wholeness again.
It profoundly changes how you look at the natural world and how you interpret the signals from your own body.
It really does. It leaves you looking at a simple glass of water or a plate of food with a completely different kind of reverence. And it leaves us with a final thought. I want you to mull over long after this deep dive ends.
Yeah.
Next time you finish a meal, maybe you're sitting at your table, the plates are cleared, and you still feel that vague, lingering sense of emptiness. I want you to consider that your body might not be asking for more calories.
Right.
What if that quiet dissatisfaction is actually your cells mourning the loss of co-presence? What if it's a deep biological longing for a time when you didn't need to consume the world, but were simply effortlessly held by it?